This is what being a NASCAR fan is all about. Singular history and tradition.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is so special.
Unmatched on-track intensity.
We gotta go.
And triple-header playoffs action to ratchet up the stakes. Throw in a can't-miss concert, camping, and the legendary atmosphere of Talladega Boulevard. And you've got more than a race. You've got Talladega. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Hey, I'm Tyler Booker. You're watching Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Great to be with you from our studios in Tuscaloosa before we hit the road this weekend to Madison, Wisconsin for Alabama's Week 3 game against Wisconsin. We'll start this show by going through everything coming up thanks to our friends at RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They've given us a smart board to go through everything coming up on the show, plus our headlines for today. We will start with a one-on-one conversation with Alabama linebacker Justin Jefferson, one of the leading tacklers from this past ball game against South Florida. Justin will not be available for the first half against Wisconsin due to a targeting call, but we'll see him on the field in the second half. Looks to be a key contributor to the Tide defense this year. Then we'll be talking some Big Ten football for really the rest of the show. Big Ten Network's Dave Revsine will join us as our national media guest of the week, giving us his perspective on Alabama making a rare road trip to Big Ten country. And then Matt Lepay, the voice of the Wisconsin Badgers, will join us for the other booth, giving us a really detailed scouting report on Wisconsin. And we'll wrap up the show by taking a look back to Kalen DeBoer's final word from last night's edition of Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show here in Tuscaloosa. Headlines for today. First, the Crimson Tide football team, Alabama against Wisconsin. Yes, 11 a.m. Central will be the start time. Radio coverage will be at 8 o'clock all across the network. It's the first time the Crimson Tide have been to Wisconsin since 1928, a game that ended in a loss for Alabama. The Crimson Tide won a neutral site matchup in 2015, so it's the third overall meeting between the schools, and the series is tied 1-1. Don't forget the Badgers will be coming here next year for their return trip to Tuscaloosa. Then next week, it'll be the first open date of the season. Then I think a team from Athens, Georgia will be coming to town after that for the SEC opener, the Georgia Bulldogs. Some other notes around Crimson Tide athletics. Soccer team back in action coming up this week. One match only this week. It'll be Friday night against Louisiana Tech, 7 p.m. here in Tuscaloosa. As I mentioned, the final non-conference match, because next week you will see the start of SEC play. The Crimson Tide taking on Texas and Tennessee on opening weekend. Volleyball team headed to San Antonio for the Roadrunner Classic. Matches against Sam Houston, UTSA, and Central Arkansas coming up. Alabama fell in its last match against Arizona, but off to a great start this year in volleyball. Great start to the year as well at Champions Lane, Vector Security Champions Lane, part of our pregame fan fest for all Crimson Tide home games. We've already seen Head Games and Smith Distillery perform. And then coming up on September 28th, it'll be Lauren Elena. She'll be in town for the Georgia game along with David Lewis. Can't wait to catch up with her, not only on this show, but then she'll be involved with everything going on at Vector Security Champions Lane around her performance. Easton Corbin also coming up later on in the month of October. Just a fantastic year coming up at Vector Security Champions Lane. For more details, go online to championslane.com. Crimson Tide football team off to a 2-0 start, and the play of linebacker Justin Jefferson, one of the reasons why. He joins us this week as one of our guests getting ready for Alabama against Wisconsin. Welcome back to Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. I'm Roger Hoover. Now, please be joined by Justin Jefferson, outstanding linebacker for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Justin, first of all, Roll Tide. How have you felt so far about the first 2 games of the year?
I feel pretty good. I feel like as a team, we still got a lot to keep improving, but we done got the win, so that's the most important thing.
Yeah, the Crimson Tide off to a 2-0 start. What did you like about fall camp? Obviously, you got to know this new coaching staff during spring ball, but how'd you guys get organized and ready for the season those few weeks here in Tuscaloosa?
Got organized the same way we always get organized. Just get everything going. Just make sure we in the tip-top shape for these hard games we got, these hard tests we got.
Certainly have had some hard tests. Week 1, a great victory against Western Kentucky, and then Week 2 against South Florida. The Crimson Tide, of course, were led in a lot of ways on defense by you, 10 tackles. What made you so successful in that ball game, getting to the ball carrier?
Just the guys around me helped me get in the position to make plays, and I can't do nothing but thank them.
What have you enjoyed most about getting to know Coach Womack?
Coach Woe? Coach Woe, he cool people. I like him a lot. He cool people. he got kids. His kids like me too, cause my name Justin Jefferson, you know, with the gritty. So yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice getting to know Coach Wall. He's been real cool to me, real good people to me.
That's certainly good to see, and obviously the linebackers have taken a huge step forward this year. How competitive is this group?
We most competitive in the building by far, cause so much on our shoulders. I ain't gonna say we gotta do more than Miro, but we Miro on the other side of the bar, so we gotta bring the juice every day and all day.
Have you seen Deontay Lawson continue to be a leader, especially now that he's got the headset in his helmet? How does he make sure you guys are on the same page?
Deontay, he does a great job. He always makes sure everybody's on the right car, makes sure doing the right thing. He's a great leader. He holds people accountable. That's my guy. I'm riding with him.
That's good to see. What's going to be most important for you and the Crimson Tide as you get ready for this Saturday against Wisconsin, and really even just the next few weeks with so many important games coming up?
Make sure everybody's staying healthy. Make sure everybody's keeping the main thing. When you ask one of us what's our goal, all of us should have the same goal in mind. That's what Miro's been saying to us, and we really buying in there, and we're really ready to take on anybody that comes in Bryant-Denny or wherever we go.
Have you liked the fan atmosphere so far here in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, it's hard. Shoot, me coming from JUCO, hey, it's always great going out seeing 100,000. Ain't never in my life seen that many people in one spot. It'd be crazy. I love it.
You love the Walk of Champions too every game day?
Every like I said, I came from JUCO. What I came from is way different. It makes you appreciate it way more. Everything, every little tradition, everything we do, I just can't do nothing but sit down and look, and thank God. I'm like, man, this is crazy every time.
Well, Justin, we can't wait to see you back on the field, continuing to get great tackles and tackles for a loss and sacks for the Crimson Tide. But just thank you for all the time you've given us today on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Time is running out to secure your seat at NASCAR's biggest and baddest track. This October 4th through the 6th, the NASCAR playoffs will make their long-awaited return to Talladega Superspeedway, where the only thing bigger than the action on the track is the unrivaled fan experience. Don't miss out on a 3-race weekend full of playoff action that will have you on the edge of your seat all race long. Get your tickets now for Talladega Playoffs Event Weekend, October 4th through the 6th at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. It's Alabama making a rare road trip on the road to a Big Ten school on campus, and Dave Revsine is someone that is a great resource for Big Ten fans because he has been, since the network launched in 2007, the main studio host for the Big Ten Network. He joins us this week as our national media guest to give us perspective not just on Alabama, Wisconsin, but where the Big Ten stands at this point of the year. Alabama going to the Big Ten for a ball game coming up this Saturday against Wisconsin. And Dave, we're certainly excited to make the trip. What can we expect in Madison coming up on Saturday?
Oh, you can expect a great environment, a fabulous college town, Roger. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you haven't, you're in for a treat. It is really a great place to hang out for a weekend. It's beautiful. It looks like the weather's going to be really nice. Madison's a very cool city. It's the state capital and also obviously has the university there. So it's got a real vibe to it. It is on two lakes. It is an isthmus. You don't get to use that word very often, but it's a narrow strip of land between two lakes. The lakes are absolutely beautiful. Camp Randall is an awesome stadium. Wisconsin fans know how to have fun. There will be great tailgates there. If you haven't been a part of the jump around before, it's really amazing. The press box literally will shake, so don't fear that the whole stadium's going to fall down. That happens every time. It's a great place to watch a game, and I hope we get more of this in the 12-team college football playoff world, because I think we're in a world now where losing one game for sure losing one game isn't going to knock you out. I think if you're a really good team, losing 2 games won't knock you out either. I hope the committee starts to give credit to schools for scheduling good competitive road games. And I hope this is a precursor of things to come, because I think this is really neat to have an intersectional game like this.
Yeah, we're certainly looking forward to it, not only this week, but next year when the Badgers come to Tuscaloosa. It should be a lot of fun. Looking at this Wisconsin program, during your time at the Big Ten Network, you've seen them really at their best. You've seen them with some years in the wilderness. Where do they stand right now, year 2 of the second full year with Luke Fickell at the helm?
Well, they've been a really consistent program by some measures, Roger. I mean, they have the 3rd longest active bowl streak in the country. They haven't had a losing season in a quarter of a century, I believe. So they're consistently good. What's interesting about what they did was that they got rid of Paul Chryst as their head coach a couple of years ago. And Paul Chryst had been a player at Wisconsin, had been an offensive coordinator there for a lot of really good teams before going to Pitt, and came back and kind of ran what Wisconsin has traditionally run, which was having really good running backs, trying to control the ball, playing exceptional defense. That's kind of who they've been. They did go through a little bit of a lull, as you said, a couple of years ago. And somewhat shockingly, Paul Chryst was let go mid-season. And I was astonished, frankly, when it happened, just because even though they hadn't had a great start to the season, it didn't feel like it was fireable. But when Chris McIntosh, the AD, explained his rationale, he essentially said that he felt like they needed to modernize the offense, and that in this expanded playoff world, that if you were going to compete at the very top, that you had to be a team that was a little bit more dynamic. And so they went out, they hired Luke Fickell, who had done an amazing job at Cincinnati, taking them to the 4-team playoff at Cincinnati. Pretty amazing when you consider that accomplishment. And then he went out and hired Phil Longo, who is an air raid guy. And frankly, the results were not great last year. They were not a good offense. It was the worst offense that Phil Longo's ever had as an offensive coordinator. It felt weird for Wisconsin. It was their highest percentage of pass plays that we've seen since the 1940s. So it was a little strange. It didn't really work. It hasn't worked great the first 2 weeks this year. So I'm fascinated to see how they match up with the Tide. But early returns are a good, not great team.
So that's the opponent for Alabama week 2 of the season. As again, Alabama gets to make the trip to Big Ten country. And you see the words behind you from your first broadcast on the Big Ten Network, talking about 11 schools in the Big Ten. What are we up to now? It's even hard to keep up with. Just how have you seen the conference change in the last few years, and now the early returns we've seen from the expanded Big Ten already this year?
Yeah, it's been amazing, Roger. We're up to 18 if you're keeping track. I always say, now we have 18 children and we love them all equally, as opposed to having 14 before. It's been amazing. I mean, it's really cool to be a true coast-to-coast league. It has changed things for us pretty dramatically, including our late-night wrap-up show, The Final Drive, kicked off promptly at 1:45 Central Time on Sunday morning. So that was something. We've done that here the last 2 weeks. It brought me back to my days at ESPN hosting the 2 a.m. Sports Center. So, but it's been great. I mean, USC, obviously, I think, has been a little bit of a surprise so far this year. Really nice win over LSU. Oregon hasn't played great, but they're still 2-0. We'll get a really good sense for them here coming up. And obviously, Alabama fans are familiar with what Kalen DeBoer left behind at Washington. They're totally overhauling that program with Jed Fish, but early returns there are pretty good, and UCLA just one game in. But for us, just in terms of the way that it changes the dynamic of the league, it's really amazing. Again, as I said, it's truly coast to coast. That part's been really cool. We brought in, I think, the 4 biggest brands on the West Coast. And I know there's just a lot of excitement here in Big Ten country, not just in football and basketball, but some of the Olympic sports, which the Big Ten values so much. To look at the history of UCLA and USC in particular in the Olympic sports is amazing.
So as you mentioned, 18 schools of the Big Ten. The SEC is now up to 16, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the league. And now another huge number, 12 teams in the college football playoff. Do you expect we could be heading towards a very heavily Big Ten and SEC field coming up once we get the bracket in December?
It feels that way. I mean, I just think we're at a point now where either you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, or you're at a disadvantage. Just the money is going to be so different in those leagues, and money just allows you to do things that you can't do without it, clearly, right? And we have seen a little bit of an arms race in college sports in terms of how coaches are paid, in terms of facilities. Now I think we're still kind of trying to figure out how NIL plays into all of that, but we're getting some pretty good indications early on. So I do think that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be where the power is concentrated. I'm fascinated, as I'm sure all the Alabama fans are and everyone in SEC country, to see how that plays out with the 12-team playoff. But it wouldn't shock me if we're looking at 7 or 8 teams from those two leagues. I mean, I certainly think there will be years like that, and that again, for those two leagues, I think we're kind of the concentration of power and the battle between them is going to be really interesting.
And how did the dynamics change in the Big Ten without divisions at this point? Could we be seeing Ohio State, Michigan 2 or 3 times a year at this rate?
Yeah, maybe. I don't think Michigan's going to make the Big Ten championship game this year. I'd be really surprised if they did. Didn't play great against Texas, as you know, and just kind of when we were at camp, it felt like they had a quarterback issue that they clearly hasn't resolved. But yes, in future years, it is a little different, right? Ohio State, Michigan don't want to move that game off the last weekend of the year, much in the same way that Bama and Auburn, I'm sure, don't want to move it off the last game of the year. It's tradition. That's when you play. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Then, yeah, you could play 2 weeks in a row, and then you could play a third time in the playoff. I think you're willing to take that risk. And I don't want to sell these other programs short. I mean, if that happens once every 5 years, I think that's fine. But there are a lot of other great programs in the Big Ten, Penn State, USC. I think Oregon's going to be great. Nebraska seems to be on the up and up. I'm not going to put them in that category yet, but I know there's a lot of excitement in Lincoln that perhaps they can revive that with Dylan Raiola, with a really good coach. In this new NIL environment, they're in a really nice position. So will it happen? I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen at some point, that you have Ohio State and Michigan playing twice in a row, but I don't see it as a yearly occurrence. I'd be really surprised.
Well, Alabama taking on Wisconsin coming up this Saturday at Camp Randall. And for fans that are watching, maybe just throughout the football season, though, what can they expect from the Big Ten Network, especially as everybody tries to catch up on everything that goes on throughout a very, very busy college football Saturday? What can you tell us about your coverage?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, Roger. I mean, these last few weeks, we have signed on to the air. I mentioned we signed off at 2:45 Central Time. We get going at 9 a.m. Central Time. So we are talking about, whatever that is, 18 hours of coverage. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's been wall-to-wall football. We've had games in 4 different windows. So we have a ton of games. We have 5 games on our air this weekend in 3 different windows. We got Michigan, we have Nebraska. So it's really great for us. The expanded Big Ten has helped us. And, the network, we're in our 18th year. We've got a pretty good thing going here and have really just had a ton of fun. And so, yeah, we certainly invite SEC fans if they want to sample a little bit of what's going on. I know I'm someone, I watch the SEC network quite a bit. I have it on often in my office, just see what's going on. Dari Nokas, one of my really good friends. And, it's fascinating to see kind of how each of the conference networks is operated. But yes, we certainly encourage SEC fans to sample a little bit of what we have going on. And we've had some great games early on this year.
Certainly have, and even as the network started, I think all of us were watching the Big Ten Network for the very first time when Appalachian State played Michigan. For you, can you take us back to that day for a moment, because there had been so much buildup. Your network gets on the air, you get that huge ball game to start, then all of a sudden Appalachian State has the upstate. Can you just walk us through that crazy day?
That was a crazy day. It really was. It's funny to think back, because part of the story that day, frankly, with the Big Ten Network was we were on DirecTV and we were on Dish Network, but we were working to get deals done with the local cable operators that really didn't get done until a year into the network. And so part of the story was that people couldn't get it. And when I think about that versus like our noon window on Saturday, we were the highest rated game on cable at noon on any cable network. So, again, including all the ESPN networks and whatnot. So it is amazing to think of where we've come. But to answer your question, yeah, it was wild. I mean, that game in 2007, it never occurred to me that App State could win the game in the build-up to it. It was a good Michigan team. It was Lloyd Carr's last team. There was some thought that this could be a national championship contender. Appalachian State was a really good team. I mean, they were one of the best teams in FCS, as we know, but it just felt like it was a bridge too far for them. One of the stories that's really interesting, Roger, is as it went along, like we were sitting there and kind of thinking, oh man, this would be horrible. And the story got told later that in the control room, our executive producer, a guy named Leon Schweier, who sadly has passed away since then, but Leon turned to Mark Silverman, who's the president of the network, and said, maybe it would be a good thing for the network if they lost. Just with the notion that people would say, well, where was that game? Why couldn't I watch that game? And it would prove this point that, hey, we were going to have really good, really compelling games. So I know Michigan fans still don't feel that way. They don't look at it as a good thing, but in hindsight, it really wasn't an important day for us because it did show that, hey, you needed to have our network, that there was going to be really compelling programming on it. But yeah, that was a wild day to think that was our first game, one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football. It really set the tone for what's been an amazing ride.
It really has been. You guys are still going strong, and we look forward to keeping up with you guys all throughout the season, especially this weekend with Alabama at Wisconsin. Dave, just thank you for the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and best of luck with everything going on.
All right, my pleasure. Hope all the Bama fans have a great time in Madison. It's an awesome place.
This is what being a NASCAR fan is all about.
Gets the win at Talladega.
Singular history and tradition. And triple header playoffs action to ratchet up the stakes. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Of course, we're excited for Alabama against Wisconsin on Saturday, and right next door to us in the other booth, it will be Matt Lepay, the voice of the Wisconsin Badgers, leading their broadcast as they are also partners with us with Learfield. Matt has been the longtime voice of Wisconsin football and men's basketball, and he joined us for the other booth presented by Marathon to give us a detailed scouting report on the Badgers ahead of Saturday.
Gearing up for Alabama's first trip to Madison since 1928. Matt, we're excited to make the trip. How's everything going in Madison, getting ready for Saturday?
No, it's going great, and yeah, in advance, we'll welcome you to Madison. So I know we were down there for a basketball game in Alabama probably 20 or so years ago. So it's going to be good to have you folks up here.
Certainly looking forward to it. Both of these teams off to a 2-0 start. What have you learned about the Badgers so far through the two games we've seen against Western Michigan and South Dakota?
Well, it's a team that, quite honestly, I think is still trying to establish an identity. There's been a philosophical shift offensively because Wisconsin, for years and years, known as kind of a ground and pound, not kind of, as a ground and pound type of operation. They have what's called the air raid now with Phil Longo. But I think that I know they still want to be physical. They've been trying to run the ball. We've seen 2 back sets. We've seen on occasion 3 in the backfield, but still they want to try to establish the passing game. And it's been up and down. I mean, there's no other way to put it. They've shown stretches of like, okay, looks like they're starting to figure things out. The next step is to sustain that over 4 quarters. So they're getting there. The process is never fast enough for a fan base. Defensively, they have some new faces through the transfer portal, a couple of really promising freshmen. But they're still, they're 2-0, which beats Notre Dame right now at 1-1. But they have not been overwhelming, to be perfectly honest. In these first 2 ball games, their run defense has been a little bit leaky. But in the fourth quarter, when they've had to make plays both sides of the ball, they've been able to do that.
A notable addition is Tyler Van Dyke coming over at quarterback after some huge numbers before in his career at Miami. How has he fit into this Wisconsin offense? What's the personality of this offense?
Well, yeah, the personality is still to be determined. I think with Tyler, he brings really good arm strength. I use the baseball comparison. He has a good fastball, and that allows him to, maybe fit the ball into some tighter windows, or just make some tougher throws. Right hash to left boundary, that type of thing. He's gotten away with 2 or 3 balls that could have been picked. He has not thrown an interception through the first couple of ball games, but there's been some good fortune with that. But he's also made some plays too. And part of this offense is they do want the quarterback to be able to run it at times. Now, I wouldn't call him a great running quarterback, but I think he might be better than what the stats would show or what they were asking him to do at Miami. He's been through so much, Roger, in his career, from Big Ten Freshman of the Year to someone who they benched briefly at Miami a year ago. But those who I know in the ACC who have covered Miami games and have covered that league in general, they talk about his toughness. He's a big, strong guy. He's been through quite a bit. And I think that, too, in addition to the physical skills and the arm strength specifically, I think just the fact that he's experienced a lot as a college football quarterback, that was attractive to Luke Fickell and the offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, as well. So still a work in progress. You would hope that the best football is still ahead of this team, but that remains to be seen. Obviously, the ultimate test coming up on Saturday.
Absolutely, and part of one of the groups that'll be tested the most will be the Wisconsin offensive line. What have you seen from that group through 2 games?
They feel really good about the starting five. There's a fair amount of experience there. The one exception would be the left guard, Joe Brunner, who is a starter for the first time, but he's just, it looks like that classic Wisconsin offensive lineman. He is from the state of Wisconsin, a really tough kid. That left side of the line is a Wisconsin-based line. The left tackle, Jack Nelson, who, by the way, is playing for his fourth position coach in 4 years. So, that's been a tough time for a program that has prided itself on stability. There hasn't been a lot of that, obviously, in the last couple 3 years. Behind that first five, though, there is very little experience. Matter of fact, they got a freshman in there for his first snaps last week, Kevin Haywood. There's a couple of other freshmen who would be in line to play if needed. As much as the world of college football is changing, I don't know how many true freshmen are asked to step in a lot on the offensive line. But so that'll be something worth watching. And again, you look at this game. That defensive front for Alabama is somewhere between really good and ridiculously good, and I would lean more toward ridiculously good with the depth of the defensive line and a linebacking core that may be as good as any group in the country.
Then you mentioned on the defense for Wisconsin, some new faces there with the transfer portal. Who are the stars that our fans need to keep an eye out for on Saturday?
Well, Ricardo Hallman, a cornerback from the state of Florida, he had 7 interceptions last season. Nobody had more in college football. He hasn't been tested a ton through these first couple of ball games. They're going to be without one of their mainstays in the linebacking core for the first half. Jake Chaney, he had a targeting penalty in the second half, so he, like Justin Jefferson, will have to sit the first half of this game. But a safety by the name of Hunter Wohler, that's a name you'll probably hear called quite a bit. He's really one of the anchors and certainly one of the team leaders on the defensive side of the ball. Those are guys that like Wohler is a veteran in this program. He's been through a lot. He's persevered. On the defensive line, a transfer from Albany, a really good FCS program a year ago, Elijah Hills he's off to a nice start. He's had a couple of sacks, had one in a big moment last week. So they're still trying to get some more pressure on the quarterback, though, and they haven't had a ton of it. But the Hills sack last week was a very, very timely one for this defense.
Luke Fickell is the head coach of the Wisconsin Badgers. Like you, got his start at Ohio State and now moves over to Madison, Wisconsin. How have you seen him really take ownership of this program and make it kind of in the image that he wants? So, what's his vision for this program?
Yeah, I'm always careful when I go down this path because the previous coaches were really good here and very, very successful. The messaging, though, can be different. I think in year two, if nothing else, Luke Fickell has doubled down on his philosophy of just demanding intensity in everything that these guys do, for the weight room, meetings, the practices, obviously everything on and off the field. He wants to be surrounded by guys who love the game beyond description, and they're getting there. And I think as they recruit either through the high schools or through the transfer portal, they're trying to get one of the areas they wanted to address, for example, in the linebacking core, was to get a little bit more length back there, maybe a little bit more overall athleticism, and they believe that they have been able to do that. So it's still, they may be a year or two away from, really being the kind of team that they want to be, but who knows in college football, the minute you think you have things figured out, stuff changes. But he definitely is someone who was, I think in year two, he's got a better lay of the land here of how things operate at Wisconsin. And yet there are things that he is in the process of changing. And one other thing, too, real quick, is that Wisconsin has done a great job for the most part. There are always exceptions, but for the most part, they've recruited within a certain radius of the state of Wisconsin. And as Fickell has said, that motion W carries a little bit more clout than he thought. So they have really, they've reached out a little bit more across the country to get players either through the portal or through high school recruiting. So we'll see. It's been attempted here before with very mixed results, but I think in today's world of college football, you have to try to get the talent here wherever that player is from, and they're in the process of doing that now.
Alabama fans for years have been excited for this weekend and for this game in Madison, Wisconsin. For those fans that are making the trip, maybe on Thursday or Friday and then leaving Sunday, what are some must-visit places kind of around Camp Randall Stadium and the city they should check out?
I always tell people when they come to town, go down State Street on the main drags in the campus area. Particularly on a night before a game, it's a lot of fun, and people are for the most part here very jovial and very friendly to you're not Minnesota, so they'll like you. You're not Ohio State, so they'll like you. So those kind of programs. I tell people you better be nice because we're going down to Tuscaloosa next year. But there's a lot of fun. A lot of fun spots, restaurants, bars, that type of thing. The Union Terrace, it overlooks one of the lakes here, Lake Mendota. It's just and the weather's supposed to be pretty good here this weekend. It's just a really nice setting here, and Madison's a clean city, with the exception of the 8 million construction barrels that are on the streets here. It's like every road is under construction, so be advised of that. But the Capitol Square, again, really nice restaurants there, and just nice places to go. So it's a friendly, it's a clean town, and fans at the game is a massive social gathering. They love their team, they love football here, but it's also a big social event where the fans will sing their songs and they'll jump around at the end of the third quarter, and from time to time they'll watch the game too. But they will have a really, really good time. It's called a party with 75,000 people all in one building.
Yeah, for our fans who have maybe seen Jump Around on TV, can you tell us how that tradition started and then how you feel watching that each and every Saturday the Badgers are at home?
Yeah, it started in 1998. There was a player by the name of Ryan Sundrup who was tight end, and he started talking with the marketing folks because he had an interest in that at the time, and a guy by the name of Kevin Klunder who used to work in athletics marketing. They're trying to come up with just something to get a little bit more juice in the crowd, and they came up with the House of Pain song "Jump Around." And the first time they played it was in a night game against Purdue, and Drew Brees was the quarterback, and they were throwing the ball 80 plus times a game. And it was one of those, like, I think near Halloween weekend, which that's a big party in and of itself around here. But it took hold. The place went crazy. And I always, tell Chris, and yourself as well, you should know that you guys will be right next to us. And when it's played, the booth will sway a little bit, and any water or soda you have in your cup, it'll look like you wonder if we're having a tremor out there. But that's a big part of it. People love to hang around for that. If they don't stay for the fourth quarter, they stay for Jump Around, and then maybe they leave for the various watering holes around Madison. So much like Alabama, you guys have your thing at the end of the third quarter. It's a big tradition here. Although I will say at Wisconsin, there's a little risk reward to that, because when things are going well and a visiting team, favored or not, is winning or in a close game, players on a visiting team get into the Jump Around thing every bit as much, if not more so, than the home team. So there is some risk with this Jump Around, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon. It's a big part of the tradition here at Camp Randall.
Can't wait to see it coming up on Saturday. Matt, just thank you for your time here with us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Can't wait to see you and the entire crew for what should be a fun ball game coming up on Saturday. But thank you again.
All right, Roger. Good to be with you. Take care. We'll see you Saturday.
The NASCAR playoffs are heading to the high banks of Talladega for what is to be a 3-race weekend for the record books. You're not going to want to miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Get your tickets now for the Talladega Playoffs event weekend, October 4th through the 6th at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. Fun conversation with Matt Lepay. We'll be seeing him on Saturday. We're going to be very busy coming up this weekend. Let's take a look at what's coming up across the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Well, tomorrow, make sure you check out the latest episode of Tide TV This Week, hosted by yours truly and Paige Riley. That's available to our TV affiliates all across the state, as well as on demand on RolledTide.com and the Alabama Athletics YouTube channel. Then on Saturday, Alabama against Wisconsin. Again, an early start for us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network at 8 a.m., taking you right up to kickoff at 11 a.m. for the Crimson Tide against the Badgers. On Sunday, you'll watch the latest episode of the DeBoer television show, where Chris Stewart and Coach DeBoer will break down everything from the Wisconsin game. And then speaking of breaking it down, we'll do so as well on Monday night, 6 p.m. for Crimson Tide Rewind, presented by the Alabama Department of Public Health. Corey Reamer and I will be with you from Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills for Crimson Tide Rewind, as we'll look back not just to the Wisconsin game, but the first 3 weeks of the year for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms below. A lot of clips from not only our interviews for Crimson Drive, Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show, the booth cam highlights presented by Yay Alabama. You can find all of that even in-game coming up on Saturday. Just follow us at UA_CTSN. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Turn those notifications on for the very latest on Alabama athletics. That's going to wrap up this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Huge thanks to our guests for today, Matt Lepay and Dave Revsine, as well, giving us their perspective on Wisconsin and the Big Ten, and then Justin Jefferson, linebacker for the Crimson Tide. Appreciate his insights ahead of a huge matchup against Wisconsin. Thanks as well to our video producer, Ethan Carabin. He put this entire show together. Thanks to all of you for watching. Now, as we close out this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, we hand the microphone to Kalen DeBoer, the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Here is his final word from last night's edition of Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show. Roll Tide, everyone.
I think it's just crazy how all of a sudden here we are week 3 already, and going on the road and excited to go do that. I think there's something special about, I know we love playing at Bryant-Denny. There's no doubt about that. The home field advantage is amazing. But I think there's something cool about going into another place and kind of locking arms or whatever the words are you want to use, and knowing it's you versus everyone there in that place. And looking forward to doing it with guys like this because they know what it takes, and it's not just what happens on Saturday, it's the work that they put in, everything they're doing here earlier in the week that will lead to what happens on game day.
Friends, check out Game Day Done Right, because there's one thing we can really all agree on. No one wants to be the last one left at a tailgate at the end of the game, having to do all the cleanup, all the breakdown while their friends are out celebrating. If you've been in this situation before, you know the true value in what the team at Game Day Done Right provides. They handle the entire process for you, from setup to breakdown. Stellar customer service on game days to make sure your group is taken care of from start to finish. All you have to do is visit GameDayDoneRight.com, reserve your tailgate package, and let their team take it from there.